life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us here. You've either purposefully selected or surfed to Life Talk, a series of verbal essays in this television format. And my name is Stephen Mills, and we're here welcoming once again with us the world celebritized educator, Bern Moses. And welcome again, Bern. Thank you for being here.
Well, sometimes it's tough, isn't it? Anyway, last week we were talking about, what was it? Contest and capacities, abilities, and pitting one against the other when it comes to ability and talent and gifts and whatever. Yeah, I was thinking about this gift idea.
Yes.
Talents and gifts. I think everyone can begin to agree with what we're saying if they think back. For example, I can remember in high school, in fact, we may send a copy of this show to this guy. His name was Don White. Uh-huh. And Don was a gifted athlete. You know what I mean? And I mean, he would come to practice late and he'd leave early. He never seemed to extend himself. I think he even smoked. I think he might have had a beer occasionally, and he went out with girls.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And but the darn guy always distinguished himself on the playing field. Mm-hmm. And that was in football and basketball and baseball, you know. Mm-hmm. Really kind of fascinating. And even back then, there was a frustration, not understanding that, hey, some people are gifted, some people have this extreme talent, and when you're competing against them, you may not be able to for some time. However, because of our innate ability to get better and better and better, we may never be perfect, no more than they are, but we can get good enough where we can compete against them if we honor the processes. For example, it's amazing how in sports people are willing to surrender to the process. And it's not true in the socioeconomic community, among salespeople and business people and what have you.
People fight it all the time.
Yeah, they try to find another way, a new way, a fresh way. Sometimes I make the analogy of quarterbacks. I mean, how many quarterbacks are there in football? I mean, when you count professional, semi-pro, college, high school, and, you know, like Sandlot and, you know, the little leagues. And the one thing you'll see is that every single quarterback, I wish I had a football here, but every single quarterback tries to throw the ball exactly the same way, like Troy Aikman does, or Steve Young, or whoever, you know. And it's kind of like putting the fingers on the laces and the back part of the ball, and they cock it behind the ear, and they spin it out, okay? No one is throwing it underhand. No one is putting their thumb on the laces. No one is wobbling the ball, you know what I mean, end over end. We're all trying to do it essentially the same way. It's like in golf. I mean, people don't say, well, I don't like that grip. I want to do it my way. You know what I mean? In other words, and yet I can get a parade of people who play golf, put them in front of an audience one at a time, not in the presence of each other, and say, how do you hold a golf club to do a drive, you know, drive the ball? And you're going to see all of them trying to do it exactly the same way, okay? And so, and that's what I call process.
Like a show that used to be on television called Star Search. I remember where they would feature neophyte or new talent, and hope that they would emerge, see talent scouts and various celebrities who would take them under their wing. They nearly all emulated someone, and that, of course, was the distinguishing point that captured their attention to the audience. It was thrilling to see.
Yeah, just copy.
Yes.
Just kind of mimic if you have to until you find your own excellence. It's just something we have to start reconditioning our young people to, because I can't even imagine what you could accomplish if you had a whole community of young people who were told, copy, mimic until you're as good as the best you want to be. And then after that, what's left? The entity, the essence of you will emerge. In other words, the student should always become better than the master, always. But they seldom do because they don't reach the master's excellence before they start doing it their way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a way, certainly, but there should be this accomplishment, this confidence that comes, and then say, okay, now we'll try it over here. Unfortunately, you try it over here without the credentials or the background, and you may falter when otherwise you might have been able to do it. Really, really fascinating. There's I know this idea of ability and talent or gifts, I mean, has to be addressed in the multi-level, the sales community, the business community at large, before people are going to reach their excellence. There's no question about that. One thing, too, this thing about goals. You know, we talk about result orientation and whatever. A lot of emphasis has been put on goals. And I've been in sales meetings, as I'm sure you might have been, where the sales manager says, okay, everybody, what are we going to do this week? You know, and George, how about you? George says, well, I'm going to do 10 units. And then Pete, he said, well, if George will do 10, I'm going to do 12. And everybody goes, you know, you're all excited. And then each person has to either match or beat all the way around the room, and every one of them have a sense of that they're going to be lying about it. They're not going to do it. No one dares say, well, I'm planning on 6. Because everybody, the manager looks to them and say, well, what's wrong with you? Why can't you have the same number of hours?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you have the same product, same price. You know, all of that's true. All the denominators are in place where you can do just as much as he does. But they're discounting the fact that this guy might be in bereavement, you know, and this guy had a parent that told him he was wonderful.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're not competing with the same tools. And so that idea of going back and restructuring, redeveloping, re-preparing people to get them on an even playing field is important. Otherwise, when they set goals, for example, a person says, I'm going to do 10 units this week. We used to say, is it possible that that person, understanding the business and what have you, could do everything possible correctly? You know, they get up in the morning and they dress and they go out and they start on time and they work as long as they can and they do all the things. Is it possible they could reach the end of the week and not do 10? Absolutely.
Sure.
Because we can't control that. We can influence it, but we can't control it. So if he says 10 and he's result-oriented and means 10 and he does 8, how does he feel?
Terrible.
Or sometimes made to feel.
Oh, even worse.
Yeah, made to feel
Humiliation.
diminished. He was a loser. He didn't make it. There's a tendency then to say, well, my gosh, next week I'll do 12. Okay? And then if he happens to do 9, and the next week he's got to do 15, and pretty soon he's not playing the game anymore. It just doesn't work. At the same time, this person here could have really applied himself well and be better prepared to do this next week. You know what I mean? In other words, we don't know about those things. We do know that this stuff doesn't work very well. The process, on the other hand, takes you through these things. In other words, we know, too, that if the person says, I'm going to do 10 this week, and he's got 10 by Thursday, he may end the week. Even though he had Friday and Saturday, he may end the week with 10.
Ah, yes.
Because there's a tendency for goal-oriented, result-oriented people to isolate. Isolate. I don't know if that's coming out well enough. Let's try another pen. See if this is any better. They isolate or they celebrate. Okay, or they disassociate. They don't even play anymore. To keep it, kind of lyrical here. Isolate, what does that mean? I can remember people in my life who had intentions, goals, results in mind, fall short and would actually go home and get in bed. They would divorce themselves from the world. I often kid about, you can walk into any movie theater in America, in every town and community, hamlet and what have you, and around, say, from 1 to 5 in the afternoon, and see lonely, dark figures watching the movie. And I will bet that a good percentage of them are salespeople, who are having a bad day, you know what I mean? Or who had a great morning.
Oh, so they're celebrating.
Yeah, they celebrate.
Taking off the afternoon.
Yeah, say, hey, man, I got a great mind, go to the movie. Or, gee, if nothing's going right, I'll just kind of take a break and what have you. And that's the beginning of a failure. It just doesn't work that way. Quite common. And I did it my first day. My first day in selling. I remember driving around the city, trying to work up enough nerve to stop the car. I was isolated. I couldn't function. I was frozen up. So I was not exposing myself to the task. And then when I finally did stop the car and make a sale, I drove all the way home, had lunch, celebrated, and what have you. It took probably 2 or 3 hours. That it could have been productive, but I was celebrating. And then I was back out in the car, isolated again.
Sure.
And there were days when I couldn't function at all. I disassociated from the process because of the overwhelm, not knowing what it was I should or should not do. It's just tragic. What we're saying is that as you accumulate the points, the process points, whatever that happens to be, it might be dials.
Oh, calling out.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't really give full credit to the fact that, a lot of people have trouble getting on the phone.
Oh,
this is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And so if one day you muster your courage and you get everything in line and you put yourself in a contributive mode and you say, I'm going to make a call, and you exercise your courage, which it takes, and you pick that phone up and you dial the number, and it's been disconnected, and you hang up, you should take credit for that. You mean, in other words, just because there was no result doesn't mean there wasn't something to celebrate. You know what I mean? In other words, it took time, and it took energy, which is a chunk of your life. That's what life is about, time and energy at our disposal. And so you took a chunk of your life, time and energy. It took some courage, you know what I mean? And so why not take credit for it? And when you do that, you begin to get into establishing a criteria by keeping statistics. As you make another call and a person doesn't have time to talk to you. Well, gosh, I mean, you should take some credit for that. It's an avoidance because it took time, energy, life, and courage. And then you do another. But if you keep making those marks, the inevitable thing is result. The inevitable thing is result. And it's fascinating, too. You can get so... I've had people where I say, look, don't worry about making a sale. Don't even think about it. Get good at making marks.
Yes.
Don't make a mark you didn't earn. Boy, that'd be bad. But if you isolate what it is you're doing and then start processing. We spoke of Deming last week. That's what he did. He would isolate that process, examine it, and only then can it be enhanced. Because if you don't know what you're doing, how can you get better? I mean, you have to know what the process is. And so keeping those little, this really, and we were all looking for security in selling and business and what have you. People want to know that they're in command, that things are going to work out okay and what have you. So that's security. But security is statistics. No, it's stability, I'm sorry. Security is stability. Now, what does that mean? Doing essentially the same thing all the time. If you're stable, you're not isolating and celebrating and not frustrating and whatever. But if you're stable in your process, then you're going to be fine, and that is statistics. Because only when you know your statistics do you feel stable and hence secure.
So you're suggesting we keep statistics on the process.
On the process.
And allow the statistics of the actual result to take care of themselves, which they always do anyway. And to do that, we must practice the process of the willingness to make the call, the practice of copying of someone who does it well.
Do you realize how mediocre a person can be and still be a champion doing it this way? Yes. Mediocre. The process-oriented person will always be the eventual winner over a long period of time. The talented or gifted person who is sporadic, cannot compete against this. Because if you really, really want to be the winner, this is the key. Because I've seen totally inept people distinguish themselves in this arena that way. It's really funny, Stephen. I've traveled all over the world visiting sales companies, and you're always anxious to meet number one.
Yes.
Every company has their number one guy. And it's kind of fascinating because more often than not, in fact, high percentage, 80, 90% of the time, when you meet this person, it's kind of like a letdown. You're a little disappointed because you expected someone with white teeth and dashing eyes and, well-groomed, got a nice car and good education, where in truth sometimes the person is a little ill-kept, a little inept, maybe not too educated, but there's one common denominator. Everyone says about this person, he's a worker.
Yes.
And say, how do they know that? Because they're conscious of this. He's in process all the time. I remember a fellow named John Moses in a company years ago, and I just couldn't hardly wait to meet him. When I met him, he still showed the ravages of his previous employment, which was working on the railroad.
Oh.
You know what I mean? He was rough. You know, his hands were rough, and you know, even though he was caring for himself now, you know what I mean? That thing can take its toll. I mean, he worked out on the lines, and he'd always wanted to be free of that and to be in sales, and he finally got into it. And he didn't know how not to work. He had an incredible work ethic.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And he just kind of put the best suit he had on when he started, and went to work, and they said make calls, so he made calls, and you know what I mean?
I do.
And the guy led the nation, and it was such a joy to realize, wow, what chance does that give to everybody? Everybody. You know what I mean? Everybody has a chance to do it. Being number one is not as big a deal, kind of, as we make it out to be, because you can't be very long.
Yeah.
Someone's going to get you.
Yes.
I remember in 1957, my intention, I was still into goal orientation, was to be number one field counselor in the United States. Well, I made it, but boy, I'll tell you, to stay there was almost impossible because other people wanted to do that too.
They sure do.
And so you get into a place where you have to kind of almost satisfy yourself to be among
Yes.
the top. You know what I mean? Because they're after you.
Which is superb. Yeah.
Yeah, this is
There's no
fine.
complaint.
This is fine. Yeah, this is terribly important to somehow get past our goal orientations. Now, I'm not against goals. I mean, that's not really fair. But I'm against what evolves around them oftentimes. But here's another thing, too, a little phrase I heard one time some years ago, that why would you ever set a goal that you didn't know you could reach when there are all kinds of goals that you know you can reach?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And that those goals that you know you can reach, when you do, will give you this. I mean, inevitably. There's a frustration in this process where you're just setting goals for the sake of goals. And people don't do that well. I have found I can go in front of any sales force in America with, we'll say, 6 or more people, 6 to 60 or 600, and say, good morning, everybody. You know, I'm delighted to tell you that I'm here today to talk to you about goals and goal setting, and I know what I'm going to see.
Ooh.
Yeah, I just want, here we go again.
Shutting down.
Yeah, I've done there, been that, had a T-shirt even, set goals, you know. Yeah, it just doesn't work. And we've talked about the Sisyphus syndrome in connection with that and what have you. Now, I think nothing wrong with having an intention. You know, the intention is to accomplish, but that your goal should be the pursuit. Rather than the pursuit of happiness, it's the happiness of pursuit. If you get real good at the pursuit, then you'll accomplish a great deal. Now, this is not, I tell you, it really seems like, and it would indeed make everything easier. But since we have been educated and have accommodated linear thinking, it's very difficult to get people to do this. You know what I mean? They'd really rather just kind of wing it, go emotionally to their goal, and hope for the best. And sometimes they make it, oftentimes they don't, most don't.
Applying that, I had tested those premises in a particular coworker who was the top sales in a telecommunications company. She and I were on a team together, and we had seen contest after contest, which she won, hands down, every single time. Distinguished herself amongst the nation and the world, and she was so weary of all the upsets and the disappointments from her past that she didn't think she could maintain it. So we had a bit of a cooperation, she and I, to stir each other. And what I had taught her was exactly what you're describing as the process. Become thrilled, animated, excited, fascinated by the process, not just the end result. And therefore, your whole day becomes invigorating, and the process of being at work and involving the customer, the prospect.
Good.
And it was thrilling. We went past what she had set as our goal for that month, and both of us had gone far beyond the markers they had set for us.
Yes, good.
It's the way to move past those.
It was a natural consequence of
honoring the process.
What do we say? Find your pleasure and your peace and your power and your profit and your progress in the process. Isn't that amazing? Because that's really true.
Yes.
In the process. And by the way, we should mention, or perhaps I'll let you tell what this has done for you. I mean, tell about our story last year.
Many things, actually. in the last several years, actually, I have been in the process of beginning, a rank beginner in a telecommunications company, literally one of the tops in the world.
You talk rank beginner. I remember, Stephen.
Truly a
They were
rank
about ready to
beginner.
get rid of you.
They were.
You were on probation. They extended the probation. I think, what, twice to 3 times?
In the process of that, I was told, change this talk time, reduce this, make this different.
Yeah.
And so the statistics watchers were paying attention. However, in that, I asked, I sought out, I copied, I practiced and honed and polished, and in addition built a scripting and an approach to the customer's needs and the sales involved in those needs that emulated what your aim and your premises are here. Doing that, I moved from literally probationary rank beginner to tops in the world among 60,000 people in sales and quality simultaneously. Now, simultaneously means that it flies in the face of the myths that say you cannot possibly do both of those.
You can be
at the same
gracious,
time.
sensitive, patient, kind, and still be number one. And
Yes.
that's not true.
And it is not true.
Good.
And so, in the first time in that corporation's history, became the tops in both of those simultaneously, and therefore showed the others that they too could move through those boundaries, or what they thought were boundaries before.
And I will wager you, I know the answer, and that is that you did that. Ended up number one, and every single day, you contributed to the elevation of someone or numbers of people. It was not a competition.
No, it
you
was
were
not.
just, it's a contribution.
Yes.
Sometimes I use the word cooperation. You know what I mean? That's how you compete and distinguish yourself. And by the way, people move aside oftentimes and let you go when they know they benefited by your existence. And that's really what happens a lot of times. I mean, they give it to you,
Yeah.
whether you're conscious of it or not.
Yeah.
And you just, wow, that's great. It's a classic thing to be able to see the process working in someone. And there's a number of people in the community that we could bring in who extraordinary. I mean, 300% and 400% increases in their volume when they surrendered their result orientation and went to process orientation. Fred Mack, perhaps you were there Wednesday.
I met him Wednesday.
Yeah, a 300% increase in an already substantial job. Tina Della Smith in real estate, a 300 to 400% increase in an already outstanding job. I mean, increasing 300 or 400% when you're not doing much cannot be acclaimed. What does that mean? Because that's a natural consequence of growth.
Sure.
But to already be a star and then become what would be this next step up?
A supernova.
A supernova. then you're talking business here.
is.
That makes a difference. Is there anything else that you would like to address in this thing while you're here? Because I depend upon you for those insights, from your experiences.
Well, I see so often the process of teams forgetting that they can come to one another instead of feeling like they're whistleblowers, an annoyance, or a gadfly in amongst themselves, that they can literally say, Stephen, I heard you saying this. Could you try it this way? It's worked for me. Try this. Give this a shot. And instead, they pull back, isolate, hide out, and don't bring what they think might be excellence to their coworkers for fear of being told, mind your own business, or get out of my way. What do you know anyway? I saw you do this or that last month. So there's a real sense of non-participation, not truly focusing on the teamwork, that can bring us all much further than we would be individually. The synergy of a professional team.
Is some of that coming from the competitive spirit? In other words, I'm not going to tell you my best shot because now I've lost my edge.
Sure, hiding
sure,
out. Yeah.
sure.
And otherwise, they would be able to function where everyone moves further and further forward, and truly excellence would emerge.
It's kind of like, I remember years ago we had a thing called the 3 Favors. It was a script that I had written over a period of about 9 years by tuning and tailoring it and getting it so that it was really effective as the beginning of a sales call. And these young people, teenagers, would be out in the world and they'd get a presentation and they might be talking to an insurance executive or whatever, and they would do the 3 favors and they would say, what was that? Would you do that again? Can I get that in writing? And I'd say, and they'd say, well, I don't know. They wouldn't know whether to share this or not or convey it. And I said, oh yeah, always give it to them. Always give it to them because we don't have to worry about the competition. Actually, in a way, competition creates mediocrity. I've always had a sense. Now, it's not true in sports necessarily because we can't make those comparisons to sports to socioeconomics. And people try to do it all the time. It doesn't work. But to me, in the socioeconomic community, if you're competing, all you got to do is be this much better, and you're the star. When in processing, you could be, and contributing, you could be way up here. In 1979, I think it was, I went into an office in Dallas, and not that I ignored what the others were doing, but I said, this is the way we're going to do it. And we ended up within about a year 300% higher than any other office in the country. I didn't need to do that to be the star. All we had to do was be 1% better than anybody else, and we would have been the leaders. But actually what happened is that everyone else came up. See, in competition, that may not happen, but in contribution, it always will. So we have to get more conscious of that.
I've seen it constantly, that play out, where people who try to adopt a sports analogy or a theme or a template to their life in business or their life in the arts or in performance, it is not an effective comparison.
Exactly.
I've been in sports myself, but distinguished in gymnastics and track and cross country and diving, swimming and diving, and it simply was not the same experience as to what I see in the business and the educational world. It's dramatically different, in fact, what we're up to, what we experience, the shortcomings, the setbacks. What are you seeing there? What should we use as our template?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we've run out of time, but hold on to that thought. And will you come next week?
Be delighted.
Is it possible because you're starting in your new project?
Well, we'll see if we can squeeze the times.
This is Life Talk. It's about life living and making a living and sometimes loving. Did I say, life living? Yeah, sometimes loving. And we have a website. You can come in and check in detail as to what we're doing, but it is www.bernmoses.com. You can find out what we do and how we do it and why we do it and et cetera, and how long we've been doing it. And our phone number is 916-366-8749. And if you'll call, we'll send you a couple tickets for you and your sweetheart, spouse, significant other, friend to come and see one of our live essays where you really get a handle on what we're doing. My name, you're Stephen Mills.
Yes.
And my name is Bern
Moses.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Bern.